Configuring alerting and notifications. I think you're going to find this to be a relatively short nugget because the process of actually configuring notifications is relatively easy to do. It's nice in the fact that it is extremely flexible in the way that you can create things like notification channels and recipients and subscriptions. But the actual process of setting them up is not terribly difficult to do, and I think you'll appreciate how easy that is. In this nugget, we're going to talk about that process of configuring notifications, and we're going to do a quick review of the different alert states that are possible for various events now that we have a couple of management packs brought into our environment, and we can actually take a look at really what we're trying to monitor. So let's actually get out of here and go back to our Operations Manager console. Now that we have, again, that SQL Server, that Active Directory, and that Windows Server management packs installed, you'll see here we still have that critical node, just like we saw before, that was associated with the Active Directory domain controller. It's not a big deal, so we're not terribly worried about it right now. But what we do want to do at this point is take a look at some of the active alerts that have popped up so we can look at how they relate to what we saw back in the earlier nugget on configuring management group settings. So you remember back in the last nugget we showed how this critical error here is talking about how the logical drive holding the 80 log file is a little low on disk space. Now, because that alert is brand new and we haven't done anything, you'll see here that the alert status is set to new. If you remember back to before, we actually had a number of different alert statuses that we could create, really unlimited alert statuses that we create based on what sorts of alert types that we had in our environment. So if, for example, your service desk had a number of different alert types like open or closed or in pending or in work, we could configure those here and actually change what the alert status is associated with that particular alert here. Now again, because we haven't touched this, the alert status always arrives under the new status. We can see a little bit more information about the context of the alert and what's happening here. You'll see here that the state DB free space is considered bad, and that's the reason why that alert is actually popped. So this is some of the information that we're seeing out of our domain controller in our environment, and this is an example of some of the power that Operations Manager has, not only to look at things like event log and performance information, but even to drill down very deeply into the behavior and the quality of the services that we're attempting to support in our environment. And so remember, as we talk about these, that the actual alert characteristics that we want to create are back down here under the Administration tab. If we go down to Settings, we have this Alert Settings here for our management group. If I double-click Alert Settings here, you'll see, just like we saw before, the new and closed resolution states and the IDs associated with each of those. If we wanted to create new states, we could do so by simply entering the resolution state and providing a unique identifier for that resolution state here. Again, this gives us the flexibility of identifying what those alerts are and maybe giving them a little bit more granularity associated with what we're doing with them. We're working on them. It's a known issue. We're waiting on a vendor, those sorts of things. This is going to have a lot of bearing whenever you start looking at Operations Manager in relation to how you're able to fulfill, for example, the service level agreements in your environment and show what your general uptime is and what your ability to resolve those alerts are when we start talking about the reporting capabilities. So be aware of these alert resolution states, and you might want to consider mapping those alert resolution states to those that you use inside of your service desk application today. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about are notifications too, because whenever an alert appears under here in the monitoring tab, there may be some situations where an alert actually is of criticality enough, is of a high enough criticality that we want to be notified through some sort of external mechanism. And what I mean here is that we don't necessarily want to have to keep watching the console all the time and seeing when these alerts pop up. And so because of this, we want to actually notify ourselves maybe through our pager, through an SMS message, or through the running of a command prompt, some sort of script, to let us know whenever an alert has occurred and some information about that alert. We do that by going down to the Administration node down here and looking first of all at notifications. You'll see here that there are recipients and subscriptions associated with alerts. The recipients are going to be the people that actually will receive those alerts. And the subscriptions are going to be essentially what sorts of alerts do those people want to subscribe to? What sort of alerts are those people interested in receiving? Now, we will do that as part of being the administrator for Operations Manager, but you'll need to obviously work with the groups in your environment to determine what sorts of things they're actually interested in. Remember that we imported in a SQL Server and an Active Directory and a basic Windows Server management pack. Now, the people that are doing the Active Directory domain controllers in our environment may not necessarily be interested in the SQL Server alerts, and vice versa, whereas everyone may be interested in the basic server alerts. And so we can adjust those as necessary by doing various subscriptions and pointing those subscriptions to various recipients. Now, however, before we do any of this, before we actually attempt to create a recipient, there's an order in which we have to do this. And let me go ahead and bring back up my little Painter Classic here and show you what that order is. The first thing we need to do is actually set up notification channels. And what these are the various mediums by which those notifications get distributed across. Again, email, SMS, command prompts, those sorts of things. Once we have the notification channels set up, then the next step is to actually identify which recipients will receive alerts along those channels. So you may find that one person likes to receive an SMS message. Another group of people may determine they want an email alert. Another group of people may want a net send, those sorts of things. So that's the second step in this process. Only after those two steps have been set up can we actually set up the subscription for identifying which alerts the recipients want to receive. So let's go through that entire process here right now. Let me go ahead and minimize this. The first thing we need to do is go back up here to the settings node. And if you remember, there was this notification tab that we actually sort of skipped over when we were talking about management group settings. Let me double click this. You'll see here that under the notification tab we have a number of different sub-tabs that talk about the different channels that we can potentially enable for notification. We have email notification, we have instant messaging notification, we have short message server notification, or short message service notification, and then we have individual commands that we may want to run when that alert pops. Let's take a look at the email channel here. If I click the email channel and enable email notification, the first thing I'm going to be requested to do is to deploy an SMTP server. Now that SMTP server could be, I'll put smtp nuggetlab.com. I also want to put a port number and then any authentication mechanism if necessary. By setting this to Windows Integrated, if you have an SMTP server that doesn't allow for authenticated or anonymous relay, then you can actually use Windows Authenticated so you don't have to enable anonymous relay for that SMTP server. Otherwise, if you have one that's allowing anonymous relay, be very careful to focus in to lock down that the ability for doing anonymous relay down to just the IP address that is your operations manager server, so you don't end up becoming an open relay, for example. So in this case, let's do smtp.nuggetlab.com over the standard SMTP port, an anonymous authentication method here. You'll see that's going to be the SMTP server that will actually send the email out to the people in our environment when a notification event occurs. We'll have a return address here that we can use, and maybe that's going to be opsmgr@nuggetlab.com. What that is that when the individual receives that email, it's going to have a return address associated with that email being sent. That return address doesn't necessarily have to be a real address that is actually monitored by people, but it needs to be there in order so that the mail can actually be sent. We can show retry primary after 5 minutes. Essentially what this says is if we have multiple SMTP servers here that we're going to retry the first one in the list after 5 minutes, if, for example, that SMTP server is down. If you have a very high reliability environment where you need to have servers up and running all the time and need to be notified, you may want to put in multiple SMTP servers in here so that you have a failover capability in the case that the first SMTP server is down. The next thing we have here is the email notification format, and you'll notice that we have a subject and the message itself that is related, and there's a lot of these variables that are included in here that allow you to identify what sorts of data you want to provide to the user in that email when they receive it. If I click the button here, you can choose the additional variables that you want to add into that subject, perhaps alert name, alert description, last modified time, or even a custom field associated with that alert. When we add that in there, it's going to be add with the $sign here to note that that actually is going to be a variable in that email subject. The same thing holds true down under the email message as well. You'll see we have some typical text down here that's not related to a variable, followed by these variables that are surrounded by $signs. If I wanted to add in additional variables, I could do so again by clicking the little arrow here and adding in that alert variable as well, owner, resolved by, raise time, etc. Now, arguably, if for an email message, it doesn't hurt you to add in pretty much as much information as possible, and then frame that email with some wrapper text to make it align properly when a person receives that message. So we can use this standard email message, which includes the alert and the source and the path and the modified date. It pretty much includes most of the information that would be of interest to the person that is receiving that email. I can also choose at what sort of encoding level if I want, if I'm not using the default of UTF-8. That's actually going to be the notification channel for email for this environment. You'll see I click the apply button here, and that enables that that notification channel for email. If I want, I can additionally do other notification channels, for example, instant messaging. If I have an instant messenger service with return address, I can also have a secondary channel for notifying people when those alerts occur. So, for example, maybe I have one group of people that prefer email and one group of people that prefer instant messaging, and maybe a third group of people that would prefer to receive it along both channels. This is something that we can additionally do here. Maybe I'll add in an IM server, imnugget.nuggetlab.com, and a return address, sip:/imnugget@nuggetlab.com. If I hit the apply button here, just like before, that's going to create that instant messaging channel for me to use. And as you'll find out just a little bit later, we will have the option of choosing which channel we are going to use depending on the type of alert that we're trying to subscribe to. I'm not going to show you the other two, but the short message service allows you to use SMS messages to deploy that information, and the command line allows you to create commands and reference those commands whenever that alert actually arrives. And so if you have scripts or those sorts of things that allow for the distribution of notifications through some other mechanism, you can write a script here and use the command channel to actually deploy it. I'm going to click OK here because we've now created those notification channels as necessary. The next step we need to do is actually create the recipients, those people who want to receive the notifications across those notification channels. Let's say that we've got a user in my domain named Bob Nugget, and Bob Nugget actually wants to receive notifications whenever alerts occur. If I right-click here in the right pane and choose New Notification Recipient, I'm offered the option of choosing which recipient display name that I actually want to send that to. In here, I can use a distribution group, or I can put in a particular person's name if I want. In this case, I'm going to put in a person's name, B Nugget. Now, if you have more people that are in a group, the smarter thing is to actually create distribution groups inside of your domain for the distribution of emails out through this mechanism. But in this case, we're just going to do it to a single user because Bob's the kind of guy that he wants to receive lots of different alerts that people don't necessarily want to receive. So in this case, when we choose the user that is going to receive those notifications, we can select whether or not that they are going to always receive notifications, or if we want to limit down to a specific schedule for when they might want to receive those notifications. Now, what this allows us to do is take Bob's pager off of being paged at 3 in the morning if he doesn't want to be paged in the middle of the night. Or if perhaps when he's on his lunch hour, he doesn't want to get paged on his lunch hour. This allows me to create a schedule associated with when Bob should actually be notified when situations occur. Perhaps I always want to, in every date range, I want to give him that ability. And I want to recur for all day from 24 hours. Or perhaps I want to limit that to just 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. I can do that as well. This allows me to set that schedule period for when I believe Bob should actually receive those notifications. Now, but again, Bob's the kind of guy, he wants to know. It doesn't matter if it's daytime, nighttime, whatever, on the weekends. He wants to know when situations have occurred that he needs to be paged. So in this case, we'll go ahead and create, for all 7 days of the week. And once we create this for all 7 days of the week, now Bob's going to get notified essentially always and all day, including the weekdays. We can actually do a schedule exclusion as well. What this allows us to do is take the existing inclusion schedule and carve out pieces that we really don't believe Bob is that interested in. Perhaps Bob's not interested in it from 2 to 3 p.m. on Sundays because that's when he's doing something in his yard. It gives us an opportunity to exclude out some additional schedules related to Bob's needs. So in this case, we've actually just put down that we want Bob to receive notifications at all times. We click over here to the next tab, and we actually are given the option of choosing what sort of notification devices we want Bob to be notified through. If I click the Add button here, you'll see we have the option of selecting a notification channel. We set up 2 of those channels before, the email and the instant messaging channel. Now, Bob's an email kind of guy, so we want to make sure that he receives the email via the notification channel there, and that's to his address, bnugget@nuggetlab.com. We can choose the schedule here again for when we want to send those notifications for that specific device. This gives us a little more flexibility for which devices receive which notifications at which time by selecting this lower checkbox down here. And really, it's the same thing as what we saw before. Again, we're always interested in sending notifications to Bob in this case. And then lastly, we would choose the notification device name. I'll put Bob's email here. If I click Finish, now we've actually created a notification device for Bob, and we're ready to set him up. You'll see now that we have a recipient name, NuggetLab/bnugget, and this is the recipient that's going to receive those notifications. But at this point, we still yet haven't identified which of the types of alerts that are of interest to Bob. We're going to do that now. Let's click over on the subscriptions node here and click in the right and choose to create a new notification subscription. And in doing this, what we're doing again is identifying what sorts of alerts that Bob wants to receive. So let's just call this Bob's Alerts. We can provide a description if necessary, and then we can choose which recipient that we've already created that we want to actually identify these alerts to be targeted towards. In this case, it's B-Nugget. We hit the OK button here. Let me go ahead and drag this screen up just a little bit so I can see the next button here. Do I want to filter the groups and classes available for approval? As you can see here, there is no user roles actually identified at this point, so I can actually filter by user role. In the security section a little later on, when we talk about security in that nugget, we'll talk about user roles and how they can be used for these filters and filtering functions. I'm going to click the next button here again, and now I have the option of selecting which of the groups of notifications is Bob interested in receiving. Now perhaps Bob's actually a domain admin for his environment, and so he's interested in knowing about any of the Windows Server 2003 domain controllers that are in the environment. Perhaps he's also a SQL Server manager because he'd want to receive all of the SQL Server information from the SQL Server groups as well, including SQL computers and SQL instances. And he's also a Windows Server administrator, so he wants to know all about the Windows Server computer group, Windows Server instances group, and Windows Server 2003 computer group. These are the alerts that are of interest to Bob. We click the next button again and we can choose what sorts of classes are we interested in adding as well. Now what's interesting here is by choosing all classes are automatically approved, this allows us, whenever new management packs are brought into the environment, those management packs and the data and the classes that are coming out of those management packs are automatically approved for being sent to Bob. Otherwise, I can choose to identify which of the classes of data subject to what he's interested in viewing is he interested in seeing. Maybe he's interested in computer information, Active Directory domain information, etc. In our case, we just want to have him see all of the information and any additional information that may occur whenever we add new management packs into our organization. I click the next button here, and then I can choose what sorts of criteria are important to Bob. Now here, this is a very critical part of how you can actually overwhelm your pagers in your organization. You want to be very cautious about what sort of categories, severities, priorities, and resolution state that you actually enable for notification. Because you could check them all. But then when that occurs, every single alert, and not only the alert, but the resolution of the alert, the creation of the alert along any priority, all the ins and outs of what's going on inside of Operations Manager is going to get alerted to that person. And you can see that you might end up with a little overload associated with the amount of alerts that's going on and having to understand and resolve and deal with each of those alerts as they arrive. You'll see here by default that only critical alerts of medium and high priority are notified. They're notified when they're new, and they're re-notified again when that alert has been closed. Lastly, we have a number of categories here associated with the alert itself. We can tailor down to just a few specific categories that are critical, or we can choose all of the categories that are critical. You may want to start by just choosing, for example, high priority issues and critical severity issues, or high and medium priority issues and critical severity issues. So again, so you don't necessarily overload the pagers of the poor people that are receiving those pages in the middle of the night. If I click the next button here, I can choose to notify again on when that alert actually ages. What this says here is that when an alert meets all the other subscription criteria but remains in an alert resolution state for longer than a few minutes, then the user gets notified again. Now think about this. We have to be very careful with this alert aging, just like with the alert criteria in the previous screen, because what happens by turning on alert aging is that every single alert that got alerted before, if it's not resolved within a certain number of minutes, well, they're going to keep getting alerted about it. So what you may consider doing in this standpoint is creating multiple different subscriptions. Some subscriptions for the lower end stuff, and some subscriptions for the very, very, very high end, extremely important alerts. Those are the ones where you may want to consider alert aging as a notification criteria for re-alerting when those occur. But be very cautious. You may find that some people that have pagers may not like you too much if you send too much information to their pagers, especially in the middle of the night. So I'm going to go ahead and choose to not notify on alert aging here and click the next button. And then lastly, we have the option of selecting customized formats for notifications. In this case, if I don't choose any of the checkboxes here, I'm going to use the default format for that notification mechanism. If I choose to check the checkbox, then I can go through and actually change some of the information here. Maybe I want to say a little hello to Bob there. Hello, Bob. Hello, Bob. And added in a little custom information associated with this notification. If I click the finish here, you'll see that the subscription is created. And now, anytime an alert occurs, Bob's going to receive that email that says that the alert is actually out there and he needs to do something with it. So that's really all there is associated with alerts and notifications. It's a relatively trivial topic, which is good because it's going to assist us with moving into the next topic, which is going to be your day-to-day management and maintenance of your operations manager environment. So what have we talked about in this topic? We talked about the alerting, and we reviewed what you may want to do to set up your alerting, and we reviewed it from the context of some of the alerts that we've received now that we have management packs and servers and works brought into our environment. We also talked about notifications and how you can set up notification channels, recipients, and subscriptions to notify your users through some external mechanism when an alert occurs. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.